Hey guys, welcome to part one of a multi-part series on creating a Flutter to-do app from scratch. So I've done a lot of these kind of tutorials online where they just lead you through the code, you make a little UI application, and that's it, right? Well, in the real world, right, when you actually start working on Flutter apps and teams of people, there's normally a lot more to it than just creating an awesome design or implementing a backend. So there's normally stuff like software flow charting, thinking about UX flow, thinking, of course, about UI and iterating through all these different versions of kind of what your interface is going to look like before you actually start building it. Thinking about your backend, your services, kind of all this different stuff that you normally don't really cover. And when you start working on larger applications, these kinds of things that aren't really in these YouTube tutorials are really, really important to get. Because if you think about everything that could go wrong when you're building a large application, and especially as you scale, to multiple screens and you're getting tens or 20s of screens and you're working with a desktop application and a website application and you're designing this interface for use in multiple locations, things can get really, really convoluted really, really fast, which is why it's good to have a solid plan beforehand. So you're thinking about all the different parts of the application before you actually start putting your fingers on the keyboard. So the first thing that we're actually going to do is put classic pencil to paper. We're going to draw out our application. All right, so I normally start sketching a few ideas, looking at inspiration on Pinterest. So we'll be going through that whole process, show you guys kind of where I get my inspiration from, how I turn that into my own ideas. We're going to go get all this inspiration, and then we're going to start speccing out requirements. Right, so what does our app want to do? In our case, it's a to-do app. So it may seem pretty simple, but if you think about an app like Todoist, for example, you have all these different feature sets, like notifications, you have location, you have tags, you have groups. There's all the different stuff that you might not think about originally. So we'll be kind of going through and speccing out exactly what we want from our app, right? And once we kind of get all those requirements out of the way, we'll take our design and we'll move it into Figma. So if you guys haven't used Figma before, it's a tool like Adobe XD or Sketch, if you've heard of those, and it's used for designing out applications. So that's speccing out all your screens, making sure the design itself all looks good before you even turn it into code. So once we have that original kind of layout finished up in Adobe XD, then we'll start working on our user flow diagram. So that's kind of what is a user going to be doing? What are all these different steps that they're going to take? How do these relate to the requirements? And kind of just speccing out that whole process so we know exactly how we're going to implement it in code. Now, once we have all this planning done, then of course we'll get writing actual code. We'll be using Firebase for the sake of simplicity for this tutorial. I don't want to be writing out an entire backend, which you could totally do on your own. So we'll be doing Firebase and of course Flutter for the app design itself. And in the future, I'll probably be doing a web design as well in React or Angular. And then at the end of this whole process, you'll have this pretty awesome app that you've made, but you'll also understand all the complexities that go behind the design and planning of the actual app. Right? In these tutorials, they often make it seem super easy, just like build something up super fast, and it's beautiful, it's done, right? Flutter is great for making a lot of iterations of things super fast, but when you're working with a team and you're working with a boss, right, and they want specific things in the app, it often becomes very, very tedious if you're making an entire Flutter design, going to your boss, talking to them about it, and then you have to redo the entire thing, right? Why waste all the time doing that? So I'm hoping to kind of teach you guys about that whole process of planning and how important that is to making awesome Flutter apps. So without ado, let's get right into the first stage. And stage one is going to be brainstorming our design and the requirements of our application. As I said before, I start on pen and paper because for me, it's just easier to kind of think things out, right? So we want to be able to add the do's. We want to be able to assign to do's a color. Want to be able to finish / mark done to do's. And then of course we want a whole user auth system and persistent storage. As we said before, both these things will be happening with Firebase. So now we have these requirements spec'd out, right? We can take these requirements and then start to think of our design, right? So what does our design have to do? Well, in order for us to add the do's, we have to have a text box, right? /form. To assign the do's a color, we need to have like some sort of pop-up. tag and / or edit to-dos. And then of course to mark them done, you can have some sort of button. User auth system, this is kind of your login form. And then persistent storage, of course, some sort of database connection. So with this in mind, we kind of spec out our screens now, right? So what screens are we going to have? Obviously, if we're having a user auth system, you have to have a login / sign up screen. We can make these one and the same. To add the do's, you need some sort of home screen. And on this home screen, there's going to be a list of all of the users' to-dos. You need to have some sort of modal pop-up for editing to-dos. Right, so that's if you have to assign data to a to-do, like your tags, or if you want to edit them. Yeah, there's a list user to-dos with buttons to kind of mark them done. Cool, so now we have our requirements list and we have a screens list. So we can start breaking this out and actually sketching out the design. Right, so I'm not going to show my whole sketching process on screen, simply because that'd be a waste of your guys' time. But basically I draw these little kind of wireframes. You can also do wireframes in tools like Figma or Sketch. And then I basically use this time to kind of think through how I want everything laid out, right? Because for example, right, on your home, so if this is your home, you could have like a message up here like, hello user, and then you can have a little, it's going to be your text bar to add it to do, and there'll be a plus button right there. And then of course, all your kind of to do is just listed out here. Right, so that could be one revision. I could draw something out where, hey, instead of this being on the top, I want this in some sort of pop-up window on the bottom, right? So you have a little plus button here. I mean, this is kind of your traditional material design app, right? And you can have all these different things, and then you could do in each card, right? You could do some sort of mosaic grid. And then you add to do's, and it's your title, tags, and then your description right here. So there's a few different options here. I'm not going to go through all the different ones. We'll just get straight into speccing this out in Figma. And I'm not going to go through all these different kind of designs and mockups and sketches that I'd normally be doing. But this is something that I recommend you guys are doing if you're working on a larger project. And then this is, of course, augmented by going into sites like Dribbble or Pinterest and looking up, To-Do app. Or if you're working on social media app or UI design, and drawing inspiration for kind of these newer designs. You can kind of get a hold of trends, what's kind of the current, in design right now, what you think is going to look good, and just kind of get ideas for generating how exactly, these screens are going to look. And really just generating ideas for how these screens are going to look, right? Because I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of to-do apps out there. You can really just pull in all these different visual elements from a bunch of different sources, put them together, and make something that's yours. And for me, that's kind of the key thing between, having kind of crappy designs that didn't look so good and having really amazing ones that made my colleagues and my boss really happy. Because it's really just getting inspiration from different places, taking all these different ideas, taking notes, creating Pinterest boards, and really kind of honing your design talent and your design aesthetic into something that you want. And then once you have all those ideas in your head, then you can make something really unique and really creative. So that's it for kind of this requirements list. Let's get into draw.io and draw out a flowchart. This is going to be a lot of fun. So as I said before, we're going to start in draw.io. So draw.io is this diagram maker right here. It's actually now called diagrams.net. But you can make your flowcharts. They have all these different shapes built out. They of course have all the different kind of connections. All right, so you can select here. I can draw a new box, add labels, add colors, all that kind of fun stuff. It's really configurable, completely free to use, and you can sync it up with Google Drive, which is pretty nice. So we're just gonna make a new one here. All right, so it's gonna be called To-Do app. And we're going to start, every flowchart that you want to make wants to start with kind of your entry point, right? So normally you use circle for that, right? It's going to be, you open up the app. Right, now the first thing you should really be doing, of course, when you open up the app, is check if the user is logged in. So use diamonds for if statements, right? So user logged in. If yes, you're going to go over here. If no, you're going to be going over to the bottom. So we're going to draw 2 rectangles over here. Rectangles are used for processes. So this one will be display login / sign up screens. And if the user is logged in, of course, yes, then you're going to navigate home. Come on, there you go. So when you're displaying your kind of login and sign up screens, right, you probably want to do default your login screen. And then you want to use some sort of user input, right? So that's going to be your parallelogram. And all these shapes that I'm pulling, so if you look up like Flowchart Shapes, these are all kind of generally defined. See input, output, process, decision tree, start, end, arrows, and there's all these kind of different shapes you can use. Really, it doesn't matter. If you're working with the team, they generally have their own kind of interpretation. I kind of use a general industry standard, which is, like these, simply because it's kind of what I learned, and that's what the majority of the teams that I work with use. So once you display your login screen, you have a few different paths here, right? You can say, hey, the user wants to sign in. If this shape wants to play with me, there we go. So if the user clicks sign up, then we'll show them the sign up screen. And of course, if they just want to log in instead, right, then we have a parallelogram, user inputs their data. And then they click sign in, right, and this is going to number 1, all right, you're first going to go set up your auth credentials for user, and then you want to create a new user document. So that user document is going to hold all the information about the user, like their current to-dos, and that's of course going to be in Firebase storage. And if they want to sign up, or sorry, that was their login screen, so that should actually be over here, right? That would be here. We can copy both of these, pressing shift click there to just kind of group them. There we go. Let's go and update the user document. So we're going to use Google Sign-In just for easy use. Right, I mean, I can create a login form. It just takes, login forms just kind of take a while because you have to set up that whole system. And honestly, like when I'm working on Flutter projects, I have this one login form that I've built, like, a while ago, and I just kind of copy and paste the code whenever I need to make a login form again, because they're a pain in the ass to make. So this is kind of your login, right? So you log in, user click sign up screen with Google Sign In, and then you get the auth credentials for the user, and then you create the user document. And actually, since you don't really need separate screens here, you can definitely just make this login or sign up, and then you have the user click Google Sign In, and then right here you can check, right? You can add a decision right here, and you say, hey, if this user document exists, or you can just say user exists already. So if they're already in the system and they kind of have a document, we can delete all this stuff. Then you want to update your user document. So let's draw these trees out. Boop. And yes. So what I mean by update is you're just kind of pulling in whatever new information is coming from Google Sign-In. So normally they'll give you stuff like the profile photo, display name, all that kind of stuff. You just want to sync that up with your existing data that you have in Firestore, so it's always up to date. And if not, you're going to create a new user document. Cool. So that's the login screen, right? So it looks like a lot, but I mean, it's kind of flowcharts, right? They get kind of bulky pretty quick. So once all that stuff is done, then we're going to show the home screen. Right. Display home screen. And both these trees go there. Oop. Cool. So what do we want to show on the home screen, right? So we're trying to show a kind of a list of the user's current to-dos. And then we're going to be showing kind of, you know, adding new to-dos, updating new to-dos with tags or colors is what we're going to call them, etc. So what we're going to do here first, actually, instead of showing your home screen, is you want to get all the user data, right? So that's going to include all the stuff like their to-dos. So if we draw out a schema, let me search a shape database. Right, so if we call this our database from Firestore, we can create a schema right here. Did not like that. So if we have our user, then what kind of data would they have, right? We're just going to do this in no format. The one, they're going to have some sort of unique ID, right? Unique ID, and this is going to be the actual ID of their auth credential, right? So in Firebase, if you kind of look at the Google sign-in, they assign each user an individual ID. So that's going to be this ID. And this user document is going to be referenced, right? So the user document ID is going to be this auth ID. So what do I mean by that? If you, when you're thinking about a database, right, especially like a NoSQL database, and you're thinking kind of the data layout, right, each document that you have in your tree, each of these documents is going to have its own unique ID assigned to it. So if you look at like Firestore database structure, sure there'll be a good diagram here. So each of these unique IDs here, that's going to align to the actual user ID. And then inside there's going to be all these different fields that the user has, and this is all going to be inside a collection called user. Right. So then if we look at Firebase user properties, then you'll see each individual user. Let's see if we can find a good one here. Firebase user. And then if you look at a Firebase user, you see that they have these IDs, right? So you're going to have your email, your provider. In our case, this can be a Google sign-in, the date they were created, last time they signed in, and then the user UID here. So that user UID is going to align to the UID of the document. And that's kind of just what we're saying here. And then we're also going to put that as a field as well, just for double redundancy. So we're going to have that. We're going to have their display name, right? Profile photo. You know, kind of just your basic profile stuff. And then you're going to start having your to-dos, right? So we can either put that inside this user document, so we can either put that inside this user document right here, or we can place this in a separate document called to-dos. And we'll examine that a little bit more as we start building out the rest of this flowchart, right? So we're going to get the user data from here. And normally when I'm signifying some sort of like data get, I just change the color to something else just to make it easier for me to understand. Cool. So now we have the user data. Now we want to show the user home screen. And then we're going to have a few different things here, right? First, we want to display all the users' to-dos. Right, so that's going to be one process, and the other process is going to be an input process, right? And that's going to be when the user clicks if they want to add a new to-do, right? And we can either do this in a modal, which is a pop-up, or a form. We're going to do a form. So I'm going to say here, user inputs new to-do in the form, and then after they click that submit, right? Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the data and update the document, with that data. So I think we're going to create a new to-do document separately from all this. And if you're thinking kind of large scale here, right, when you're doing database design, it's kind of a whole topic within itself. But you generally, like larger, does not want me to copy that, larger kind of document types would be something like your user, right? Because generally in an actual full-scale application, you're going to have a lot of these different fields on a user, you know, like your settings, all that kind of stuff. And when you're just wanting to get things like, you know, your to-dos, you don't have to pull all this data along with the to-dos. That just adds latency. You want to be able to do this kind of once at the very beginning and then not worry about it. So that's why we kind of keep these separate. Just because, you know, when you're getting data, you have to think of efficiency, right? Breaking up your data into small enough chunks where they're, you know, queryable really easily. So let's call this our to-do document. Now we're also going to make this have a schema of our auth ID. So we're going to have an array of to-dos here. And inside of this to-do type, which I'm going to define down here, we're going to have the string, right, which is going to be kind of the name. String, we're going to have something called tag, also going to be a string. And then we'll probably want to have this ordered, and we probably want to have this ordered some way. So we can add something right here. We can either add ordering, trying to think of the best way to do this. Let's add a date added, and we'll just sort by date for now, and then we'll come back here and re-examine this if we want to later add the ability for kind of users to sort their own to-dos. Cool, so we got tag, date added, name, and then let's add like a due date, just for the fun of it. Okay, yeah, so now you're getting your auth ID here, right? So that's going to align to this, to your user document. You get your to-dos. There's a single field called to-dos, which is an array of these. That looks pretty good. And then the only other thing I might be thinking that you might want, something like groups here, right? Gonna be an array of strings. And that's so if you think about how, you know, you get a group, you don't want to have to get all the to-dos, query through them, filter out all these different group names just to get the names of all the different groups. In databases, especially Firestore, it's honestly fine if you copy data, right? It's not a bad thing if you copy data if it makes your querying more efficient, and that's what we're doing here. So we're going to update the to-do document, which is going to go up here. Cool. This is going to be, you know, at the /user ID. This should be going the other way. There we go. That's one option. And then the other option, of course, is the user wants to edit to do. So this is going to be something where, for example, they want to change the category, right? So this is going to display a modal. This is our process. We're going to have to bridge this here. Let's turn on Yeah, that's fine. We'll turn on large comps. No, yeah, we want to arc. There you go. So down here, if you want to edit the to-do, right, there's going to show pop-up. And this pop-up is going to have the name, you know. We also have our group right here, and then our tag. And then on the home screen as well, right, we're also going to have all these other screens, right, the option for the user to go into group screen. So the group screen is going to show all the to-dos of a specific group, which you can query here. So that's going to be an option as well. This kind of going to be your navigation right here. Right, this is your nav tree. And I'll probably put that, you know, with a like a small side menu. And this is going to be the exact same thing as the home menu, just, you know, with all of these for the to-dos of that group, essentially. That's an option, or of course you can just add filters here. And then one more option besides editing to-dos is we're going to want to be able to filter to-dos. So that's actually what we're going to do instead of having a separate group screen. And in this filter, you can filter, you know, by group or by tag. Bam. So this is what it's going to do is, or you know, the user select tags that they want, and then you're going to get the data, and then you're going to filter data for tag, and then you're going to assign that some sort of value right here, right? So once you got to filter data for the tag, you're going to display your to-dos. Right, and then after submit, update document. We're going to add a little title right here. Submit, update document, that's just going to go up here. That purple. Bam. So that makes sense so far, right? So you got your filter to-dos, input to-dos, edit to-dos. It's like a REST API, right? You know, your get, set, edit. I guess the only thing we're forgetting is delete. So we'll add one down here. I'm just gonna, yeah, it's fine. It's a little bit messy, but that's okay. It's gonna be marked to do as done. So we can either have them delete it, or we can add, you know, a done thing on here if we want to archive it. So that's an option. I'm just going to do delete for now, but you can always archive it just by adding a single field here. So mark to do is done, and this is going to go through and delete to do. So that is going to delete the to do of the user up here. Yeah, so that's just going to go through and delete that specified one from up here. So, you know, just take your array, copy it, remove that data, and then push it back up. So actually, I mean, I'm thinking the more I think about it, you're probably going to want to make this to-dos a subcollection. So this can be a subcollection of to-dos. Or of this to-do document, and that way this subcollection is actually it's going to be this to-do, right? So this is going to represent that subcollection, and then oopsie daisies. What we'll do is we'll just make subcollection. This is going to be a to-do. You're going to have something, you know, just like a individual ID. That's going to be your to-do ID, and then you can reference each to-do by ID in the user collection. So the only downside of this is now, since, you know, we don't have a separate collection, you know, this is just a sub-collection for this. The downside is now if we wanted to share to-dos between users, for example, we wouldn't really be as feasible with this database model. But I think for the purposes of what we're doing, I think this is going to be easier for us from Subcollection, right? Because then you can reference each to-do with a specific ID. And the one bottleneck too, I forgot to mention, is Firestore collection documents are limited to a maximum of 1 megabyte. So that means, all this data inside this user document, which includes, all this user stuff, display name, profile photo, combined with all the different to-dos that the user has, cannot exceed 1 megabyte. It's probably not going to be a problem for our application, but you want to keep that in mind if you ever want to scale this up into something production level. So that looks pretty good, actually. You got a pretty long flowchart here. And this is going to be your baseline, right? So now that we have all this crap spec'd out, our database model spec'd out, we know how our app is going to work. We know which screens we're going to have to make, right? So we're going to have to make a home screen. We have to create some sort of screen to show the current to-dos, some sort of way for the user to input into to-dos, like a form, a way to edit them. So we're thinking a pop-up here. So you have to design the pop-up. You have to design some way to filter them out. And then, of course, your whole auth system. So now that we kind of have a general idea of what we have to design, it's going to make our process in Figma laying out this app a lot easier. So that's going to be it for this video. This was a long enough video as is. Thank you guys for checking this out. And, of course, ask any questions in the comments. I'll link a public link to this To-Do app diagram in the description. And then next episode, we're going to be jumping into Figma and starting to design out this application. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, just let me know, and I'll go through and answer them. And I'll see you guys next time.